widely spoken throughout the country. Moreover, these ladies are so beautiful. Family is the main value in the life of a Ghanaian woman. Divorce in Ghana is considered a shame for a family, especially a woman. But the material side is often of paramount importance. A financially successful marriage becomes a priority for many girls and their mothers. They idolize their husbands. They don't cheat on their men and love them madly. Upon visiting the capital of the country, Accra, and meeting local beauties, you are unlikely to want to leave. Number 5. Congo. You will not be able to take your eyes off the local girls. The traditional upbringing of girls is based on a respectful attitude towards parents, older relatives, and other people in general. Compared to European or Asian women, African women are more relaxed. You can build a wonderful romantic relationship with them. When building relationships with Congolese women, it is important to remember that they have a completely different mentality than Western girls. Still, Congolese ladies are eager to get acquainted and communicate with foreigners. By the way, these women are very loyal and don't cheat on their men. Number 4. Tanzania. Tanzanian women are calm, slow, and relaxed. Family in Tanzania is the main value of a person, and therefore, they take its creation seriously and observe all traditions and rituals. It is customary to have many children here, even though on average, there are about 4 children in each family. Travelers should be prepared for increased attention. Girls are ready to marry a European, an American, or a man from another African country. You can meet your love both in Tanzania itself, and on a dating site. But the second option is less effective since not everyone has the internet there. Therefore, it is best to get acquainted while traveling around the country. Number 3. Somalia.
Whoa, Somalia is number 3. Now, we got a young lady that's in the chat. Her name is Dua Mohammed. And she said, what about Somalia? So, dear, your country is number 3. She said, we are good women too. Those are East Africans. She said, we are very traditional and we take care of our men. She said, all he has to do is take care of the financial needs, but everything else that he tells us to do, we do not deny our men of anything. Wow, that's powerful. And you know, that's the sad thing, Ike and Dr. Neal. You got men making $75,000. That's not enough. They take care of everything home. And these women in America, many of them say they can't rest in their femininity. He got to make $250,000. He got to make $500,000. And so this young lady is from Somalia, and she says, so Somali women are an option for men as well. And we're going to talk about that because I want to see you men win. I want to see some of you single men win. And if you can't find your wife here in America, then go abroad. She said, yay. So hold tight. Let's finish listening to the beautiful Somalian women in Eritrea. Hold tight.
Unfortunately, a reasonable percentage of men grow up to be bandits, pirates, leaving women alone. Women are responsible for how to feed their children and survive on their own. Parents may even sell their daughter to bandits or marry off in exchange for water or food. So, the number of marriages increases dramatically during a drought. Sadly, nearly half of Somali women are married before the age of 18. Therefore, girls will be happy if they meet a foreigner who will love and protect them, and in return, they will be the most devoted wives. Number 2. Kenya. This is probably the best African nationality to marry. In the capital Nairobi, girls are very stunning,
This
and
script
it
was
is
written by a
simply
Kenyan.
impossible to walk the streets so as not to pay attention to them. By the degree of extravagance, pretentious hairstyles, and outfits, Kenyan girls can easily compete for the first places in the world. Girls who live here take their families very seriously. Divorce is the greatest rarity. If you are a kind and friendly man, then dating in Kenya will be extremely interesting for you. What could be more beautiful than the love that originated between two interesting people? Number 1. Ethiopia. Travelers say that when you see a beautiful Ethiopian for the first time, your heart beats faster. They have chiseled shapes, these women are sculpted without any surgical interventions, and they are graceful as panthers and hot as a tropical night. In Ethiopia, although women's equality has been enshrined in legislation for more than 60 years, these laws don't work in reality. Single men and women share the same social status. But after marriage, a girl falls completely under the authority of her husband and his family. The legal age for marriage is 18. To start a relationship with an exotic beauty, it is not necessary to go to Africa for the thrill. It's much easier to find them on online dating sites. Now you know. From which country do you dream of finding the love of your life?
They have no rhythm though. All their dances
Share
are
with
just
us in the
jumps.
comments section and don't.
All right, hold on, Doc. Hold on. All right, you're up there laughing. But we're gonna talk about Burundi real quick, and then I'm gonna let Doc bring it in because Doc has been traveling over the traverses of Senegal and Gambia here recently. Let me show you guys this clip. I've seen it before. But then I'm gonna let Doc and Ike finish the conversation. But Ike, based on what you're hearing, man, are you shocked that they put Ethiopia number one? Are you shocked?
Well, I'm not shocked. Well, I think that this is a good kind of a general video. It's not meant to be deeply accurate.
Not exhaustive, right? Mm-hmm.
Or nor even some of the pictures that are shown, for example, are not accurate. Like, for example, for the South Sudan person, I believe. But it doesn't really matter in the sense in general because that's not the level of resolution for which this is meant, right? So we were talking about people who probably don't know anything about, So, and in that same regard, it makes sense that Ethiopia will be number one because I think that's what will be generally agreed upon before you break out into camps about whether or not you're, for example, where I would say, I don't really want. I think she's not as robust or strong, quite literally and figuratively, as the West African woman, and I want a stronger person, for example, and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
But yeah. Right, but other than that, it's fairly spot on for a general broadcast, if you will.
Yeah. The African tribe, they're called the Mandingos. I think the Mandingos are close to.
But that Burundi video, you got to play that if you get.
Yeah. I'm gonna play it. I've seen it before. Yeah. I've seen it before. But Doc, real quick, before I play the Burundi video, how would you like to answer the conversation? You were in Senegal and Gambia, and you said don't sleep on African women. I need you to qualify.
Yeah, how you guys doing?
How you doing, brother? Glad you were able to pop in.
Good. Yeah. Let me just say, man, this is an excellent conversation. Coach, we talked about this before you went on the air and everything like that.
Yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
And I'm happy that I was able to come through. Mm-hmm. When I say don't sleep on Africa, it's because we have this passport travel ideology that's very, very popular right now, and much of the passport content that we see all across social media deals primarily with other parts of the diaspora. So I've talked a lot about Brazil, because I've been there and what have you, and you have other brothers who are part of passport / SYSBM, and they talk about Brazil, they talk about Colombia, Venezuela, various parts of South America, places where Spanish is spoken, as well as Portuguese and what have you, but you don't have a lot of passport content that deals primarily with the continent of Africa, and
right.
I have to emphasize Africa because I think that the people in the passport community, and let me also say this, a lot of the passport content, you also have, brothers who are talking about different parts of Europe, Germany, they're talking about Poland, Sweden, Eastern and Western Europe, you understand? And there's nothing wrong with that. You know what I mean? You right. Go where your preferences take you or what have you. But there are more than 1 billion people on the continent of Africa. Okay, and Africa is going to be the leader of the world in terms of human population, in terms of resources, in terms of so many things in the next 100, 200 years. You understand? And Africa is the beginning of everything. And so I find it personally problematic that Africa is not highlighted as a site for men who seek to travel and to broaden their horizons. To meet women and to experience culture, to connect with tradition, so on and so forth. And so that's why I say don't sleep on Africa. And I'm going to be completely honest with you. And this has been said about passport bros and the movement and what have you, about out from outsiders, and it's not necessarily false. You know what I mean? I mean there's a level of anti-blackness and even colorism that exists that we don't want to deal with. You understand? We have deeply ingrained stereotypes and myths about Africa that we don't want to acknowledge. And so when I say don't sleep on Africa, it's in the face of all of that. So I went to Africa for the very first time. I've been wanting to go for, the bulk of my adult life, being someone who was shaped, years ago by Black nationalism and later by, Pan-Africanism, what have you. Africa has been something that I wanted to experience for a very, very long time. And back in June of this year, not too long ago, I took my first trip to Senegal, to Dakar in particular, and I spent 2.5 weeks in Dakar. And initially, I traveled with a group. I was there for 1 week with the group, and then for the rest of my stay there, I was by myself. And it was one of the best experiences that I had as a traveler, and just as a Black man. And it was so profound and so impactful that I decided to go back to Senegal back in September. And I spent approximately 34 days in Senegal. Went there, and I went. I traveled on the eve of my birthday, which was September the 5th. My birthday was September the 6th, and I woke up. I literally woke up on a plane, Delta Airlines, in Africa. And the first thing that I put on my Facebook post, I made a Facebook post, and I said, I woke up in Africa on my birthday. You understand? And that was the beginning of just a wonderful 34-day experience in Senegal, Dakar in particular. And while I was in Senegal, I took a trip to Gambia. Spent several days in the Republic of Gambia. And going to Gambia was also a wonderful experience. And I met so many people there. So here's the thing, we're talking about West Africa. We're talking about parts of Africa that has been shaped profoundly by Islamic traditions, African Islam in particular. And I have to emphasize that because that is the one thing that stood out for me in my experience. And the one thing that shaped my entire experience in Africa was Islam and the structure that exists. Islam is not perfect anywhere in the world, but Islam in Africa is not the same Islam that you're going to find in the white parts of Africa, in the Arab parts of the world. Okay, and they have a different flavor. Islam is something I have studied. I'm not a Muslim, but I have always had profound respect for Islamic traditions and what have you. So I would just say that is the background for my experience of Africa and what I saw in terms of that culture and eating with and fellowshipping with Muslims, going to an event. I went to a city that's not far from Dakar called Touba. I went to an Islamic annual Islamic event that happens every year called the Magdal de Touba. And I was there for 3 days, and I just gathered with hundreds and hundreds of Muslims, men and women and families, and the experience was just overwhelming. I'll just say that.
Wow, right. And we're going to get deeper into it, man, when it comes down to femininity as well. I'm going to show this clip of Burundi. And I had already seen the clip that Ike showed to me, but we're going to play it again because some Burundi women are underrated as well. And I believe that's Central Africa, so hold tight.
Bold, black, proud, and smart. They are some of the most beautiful women in Africa, and you may find yourself falling in love at first sight. Let's look at a few reasons why these women are special. One, hardworking. Burundian women are literally workhorses. They enjoy working and providing for their families. Sometimes the man of the house may not even be working, but these women will not complain. She will work from dawn to sunset without complaining at all. What is amazing and strange is that she will still...
And guys, here's the difference real quick. I'm going to continue to play this, but here's the difference. These women are still feminine. These women from Burundi still work, and they still honor their family, honor tradition. But sadly, some women, not all, but many women in the West will say, well, I can't be feminine because I got to work. I can't rest in my femininity because I got to work. And when you look at our ancestors, the black women from the past, our grandmothers, those women, I was listening to T.J. Randolph, and she was saying that how her mother, grandmother worked, but also still adhere to traditionalism. Just like a lot of men were sharecroppers and work, they worked the farms, they worked the fields, but they still did the maintenance around the house. But sadly, women in America have become so selfish and so entitled that any modicum of support for family tradition and the man is seen as slavery. But hold tight.
allow the man to have this say in the home. Submissive. Whether you consider this a positive or a negative trait depends on your cultural background. Burundi society is very patriarchal, and women have been conditioned by the culture to respect and obey their men, sometimes to a fault. I think this may be a cultural barrier that holds back many Burundian women, but one cannot deny that this attribute is a recipe for a very peaceful marriage, at least within the African context.
And what people don't understand, guys, about submission, it just basically means to agree. People always see the word submission in a negative context. Even this woman, the editor, said they could be holding them back, but it doesn't, as long as there's healthy and mutual respect. We all submit, but we submit in different ways. He submits to honor, love, and protect her. She submits or agrees to honor, respect his headship as a man. It's a very beautiful and a powerful concoction if people understand the significance of it. Guys, do me a favor. I'm sharing this stream. Let's get the likes up. These kind of shows sadly trigger some folks. But I'm for male empowerment. I got Dr. Ronald Neal in the house. He traveled with me to Brazil, but he's also traveled to West Africa. And I got a real Nigerian American brother, Ike Ogamia. So keep listening, guys. We're going to finish this conversation. Please share this stream, guys. Share it so we can get the subscribers up and also get the donations up. Thank you.
If you manage to get a Burundian wife, rest assured that you will have peace of mind. This is in total contrast to Kenyan women who like to assert dominance in marriage to the mental detriment of their men. Three, majestically beautiful. A typical Burundian lady is tall, graceful, and has this air of innocence in her looks. She is full-bodied and has the curves in all the right places. She is blessed with a disarming smile and bright, sparkling eyes. If you treat her well, this beauty has a tendency to really blossom to angelic levels. So make sure you do. She is also beautiful on the inside too, and even the most beautiful one will not allow her beauty to diminish her humility. 4. Resilient. Burundi has experienced numerous natural and man-made disasters, including a long civil war, genocides, devastating soil erosion, and a severe economic downturn. Burundian women have been the major victims of the effects of all this, but guess what? This has not dampened their capacity to love. If you are genuine, a Burundian woman will reciprocate accordingly. The trauma might still be there, but their tenacity is legendary. As clearly demonstrated, Burundian women are indeed gems, and one more reason why Africa should be proud. Thank you for watching. Please make sure you subscribe to Afro-Artista Films for.
All right, so you guys heard it. Guys, if you got any questions, donate to the channel. I will read your questions, but I will be limiting the stream for the sake of Ike's time and Dr. Neal's time, and also my time for questions. But if you have questions, please donate. And on that note, my man Shocks asked a question. He said, any opinion on Sicilius women? I don't know what that means.
Me neither. Please ignorance on that one.
Okay, but hearing that, Doc, and also Burundi women are an option. I've seen this video before. They're gorgeous. They're pretty. What's your take on what they said about the women from Burundi? Starting with Ike and then Doc.
So part of the reason why I wanted to play that because remember we were talking about the fact that the 0.5% divorce rate does not mean life is a bed of roses. It does not mean that, people didn't do what people do, right? Does not mean that angels reside in this particular place. Mm-hmm. It means something else. And I think that this video kind of emphasized that aspect of like, okay, well, in terms of like the war, the trauma, and all that, those other types of things, talking about adhering steadfast to certain norms. And with even though you can tell from the narrator, she was kind of like, she mentioned, well, I think this might be limiting to the women, but that kind of a thing. But that idea, I think, was emphasized in this, basically saying that it is a particular attribute of humanity. And if I would go back to my when I said there's nature, there's duty, and then there's aspirations that you may have, right?
Right.
To any kind of society. Mm-hmm. And basically that the West has gone way off on the aspirations end and not coming back to the duty and nature aspect. I think nature really suffers a lot. If you just look at let's just call it the intellectual landscape, any kind of nature, even biological nature, right? Any kind of substrate of any sort is kind of demeaned, seen as anachronistic and old way of thinking. Like, it is called essentialism. You're an essentialist. Right. So the idea of talking about your nature as a man, your nature as a woman, and then the duties that and therefore sacrifices, and the deal that has to happen, the fundamental political deal that has to happen, right? Where because you can't just you have to use the base nature of people in order to form a society. You don't become angels when society is formed. It's basically a deal that says, hey, man, in order to take on this particular responsibility, your particular base need to be kind of glorified, if you will, and achieve something will be met. If you're a particular type of man in the society, we will bestow that upon you. And women, if you check, and therefore you have to check certain aspects of yourself, right? You have to check your violent nature and all these other things. Women, same thing. You check this hypergamy thing or blah, 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 or the ways in which you're likely to manipulate and such. And then you will be an honorable woman, right? But the idea that we just ignore that we have nature, the biggest down part of that is we ignore that we are sinful creatures, to put it in just simple colloquialism there. Like, it's like you ignore your nature, now you think you're an angel, but you de facto declare that we're not freaking angels and this, and all that, right? So I think that this video kind of encapsulated a whole bunch of that. So right. Those are my thoughts anyways.
Yeah, and it reverberates the sentiment. Dua Muhammad said, "I'm enjoying the show because it's rare for us African women to be seen as an option because most of the time it's focused on Colombia." And Doc, you know more about that. You and I were in Brazil, and you said it so poetically. You said, "Don't sleep on Africa." What did you learn about the women in Senegal and also in Gambia that more or less parrots the sentiment of why men shouldn't sleep on women in Africa?
Well, let me just say this. It's interesting that you played that video because while I was in Senegal, I went on dates with a woman from Burundi
Oh,
and
wow. Wow.
and a
Wow.
woman from Kenya. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and both of these were educated women and very pleasant women, very nice women. The Burundi woman. I would just say this: these were women they've been westernized, and they have a combination of the traditional as well as the so-called modern, what have you. And I had very pleasant experiences with both of these women. Interestingly, the woman from Kenya who I did date, she was very feminist oriented. She had a very feminist mindset,
Right. Mm-hmm.
and she was very clear about that. She was a single woman in her early 30s and what have you, not married, no children, what have you, and no intentions of getting married and having children. And so, this idea that all African women fit this type of mold is just not true. You know what I mean? And you have variation, so you have to make room for all that. But that was a part of my wonderful experience in Senegal, in the city of Dakar, in particular, that you have a variety of women who are there. But the wonderful thing about my experience was kind of similar to Brazil. There was no attack. There was no sense that um, heterosexual interactions between men and women was somehow abnormal or pathological or demonic. You know what I mean? In the Western societies, rather, people have gone overboard with this thing called toxic masculinity and what have you,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and it has damaged relations between men and women. And so what I experienced in my time in West Africa, and this is true for Gambia as well, is that the African women that I met and I encountered were very laid back. They were very open. Senegal and Gambia are very tolerant. These are predominantly Muslim countries or what have you, but they are not strict, hardcore, super orthodox countries. They have their strictures, they have their rules, and what have you. There's a demand for decorum and everything, but it's not so stringent where you can't have basic heterosexual, positive, pro-social interactions, with women. And so the absence of all of the toxicity in the West is just refreshing. It is just
Mm.
refreshing.
Right.
And again, I mean, you can, just walking up to people, you can walk up to people and just have a regular conversation. Hello, how are you doing? What is your name? What have you? And there is no drama that is attached to it. You understand? And so
Right.
it's
Right.
very,
Right.
very, very, very different. And so it makes you, as someone who's an American black man, it just makes you um, attach yourself, to what is there,
Right.
and then again layered on to the traditions. We're talking about thousands and thousands of years of religious tradition,
Mm-hmm.
thousands of years of African and indigenous traditions,
Mm-hmm.
where traditional masculinity is understood in a particular way and traditional femininity is understood in a particular way. That only facilitates everything that is there. And so um, you can't help. I couldn't help but be drawn to it. You understand? And the reality is that there's an interest in American men. There's an interest in American black men.
Right.
Just as much as we are fascinated with them, they are fascinated and interested in us. You understand?
Mm-hmm.
And I have to go back to what Ike says.
Mm-hmm.
No, of course, you're not going to find flawless women. I mean, you've got the underside of femininity that is there, and I saw the underside of femininity that is there. You understand? But the underside is not the dominant impulse that is there. You understand what I'm saying? So that is that it is offset by the fact that you have a society that is still shaped by those traditions, where there's still respect for those traditions. Despite the fact that globalization is compelling those societies to shift and to move in certain kinds of ways. And I've said this on my own platform. Globalization is just something that's inescapable. You can't get around it.
Right.
We are all exposed to one another. They have the internet. They got social media. They're exposed, but at the same time, they have buffers. They have buffers. So I will say, Senegal in particular, so this is a French-speaking country, predominantly French and what have you.
Mm-hmm.
And similar to Brazil, where Portuguese is the dominant language, the language stands as a kind of firewall. It's a firewall to certain aspects of Western culture, especially American culture.
Doc, do me a favor real quick. Hold tight. Freeze your point. Ike got to go. Ike, I know you got to go. You text me in the back. But before you go, Ike, what else you wanted to add to the conversation before you go? What did you get from the conversation? The young lady, Masara Muhammad, said, it's so pleasant for us to talk about it. For some reason, Ike, I said, all my shows have been talking about passports and pearls as it relates to South America and then the American assignment. But I said, we need to go to Africa. And I thought about you and Doc. And I'm so honored to have Doc on the show. But before you go, African women are a viable choice, and you talked about it in part. But what did you garner from the show? What did you gather? And how does a man need to vet a woman, an African woman, for a wife? It's loaded. But what did you gather from the show? And how does a man need to vet a woman going to Africa? And then I'm going to let Doc finish, because I know you got to go.
Ooh, the vet one, I may have to punt a little bit on that because that's a whole other 3-hour show, right?
Okay, all right.
Because not everybody is built with the same kinds of instrumentation, nor is everyone looking for the same thing. So there's some people whom, let's say for me, for example, there's almost like a vibe check that I can do with someone. But not everybody is built that way. And when I say vibe check, I'm not just talking about some woo stuff, okay? But there is so let me take, for example, since we all have, strengths, we can all have like a blind spot. It kind of goes with having the strength, right? And ultimately, you want to be able to have a woman that has something complementary in that kind of psychological construct that'll work well for your blind spot, right? And typically, so this is why I'm talking about that instrumentation from the internal perspective. So you have to do the vetting, right? So I think that there's something that needs to be done internally first in terms of checking your instrument panels, right? And figuring out, and then you go vet. So I think a big part of it is kind of figuring out what that particular blind spot is, so that you can then key in with the other person. For me, for example, I know that I need somebody that's particularly strong, right? And particularly on the more thinking dominant than feeling dominant. Even in the woman, right? But in terms of the show in general, I think that we really drill down on a few points here about nature, and at the end of the day, it comes down to: are you okay with nature? Are you a kind of woman that can say, like a test, for example, a woman that can say, "Well, you know how women are." That's a check. That's a pointing in the direction of a notion of nature, a notion of, and being okay with it, right? This is how men are, this is how women are. And to say it in a non-ironic, non-strange way, and these are also answering the vetting questions, right, in a certain way, right? To say it in a non-ironic, non-strange way, those are things that you would check. To speak of duty in a way that that doesn't have to then mix with the ego, right? Where you don't have to always protect your ego when you're talking about duty, which is a sign of that kind of over aspirational aspect towards which I'm saying the whole West has moved towards, right? Where it's very, you mentioned solipsism in the show, Kosher Clinician, right?
Right.
That kind of a notion of, okay, I can't speak of duty without having to talk about, well, but my freedom, blah, blah. It's like, duty is a different thing, okay? All right. And so there's a certain kind of matter of factness to talking about duty, which is another check that I do. And I think, that you should be able to discern these from communication. And then there are tests, okay? Like tests of, now obviously you check that there's a good relationship with the father, right? That's, goes into vetting big time. There's certain tests that you do which have to do with, does she respect your role in the relationship? Even this is before marriage, before you even propose. This is let's say you're talking about, you're trying to get to a particular outcome, right? So vetting, okay, is vetting for what? You're vetting for a long-term outcome. You're going to marry this person, start family, whatever, right? So you want to make sure that they're already that, as Kevin Samuels used to say, that they're already a wife, as the
right.
That way. And that will be tests of your particular authority. Like, for example, if you were to say, hey, I want you to do X, Y, and Z in this particular, I've arranged this particular thing in this way, or let me put it even simply like this, like, you know what, I got you a gym, a personal trainer, and I think you need to do X, Y, maybe that's because that's what's important to you, and the way in which she takes that, or whatever kind of thing that you're set up in the real world, that you say, okay, go, I've chosen the path, go. See what happens. Okay, because that'll tell you all kinds of things, because that's what whether it's a business or marriage and all those type of things, that's like 99% of what it is this kind of, okay, I'm going to trust you to do your part, and I'm going to move forward accordingly. So I did these checks, that I have, I know you too. You also have a very firm hand, especially with West African women.
West African women, right?
Of a particular sort. And what I mean by firm hand is, like, they expect you to be like, because again, there's that whole kind of baseline, right? If you measure from a Western standard, the rambunctiousness of the average Nigerian human being, whether male or female, seems like they're already at 5 or 6, but that's their zero. You just got to recalibrate where your zero is, and then see that, oh, okay, she's not crazy. It's just a loud West African woman. But the fact still remains, it's a 0.5% divorce rate, because the tradition is higher than, her rambunctiousness. But anyways, those are my final thoughts.
Well, listen, man, I'll bring you back, man. We'll do a show talking about how to vet a West African woman. We'll make it comprehensive. Thank you for tuning in, man. I appreciate your time. Me and Doc.
No problem. Shout out to Dr. Ronald Neal as well. Always a pleasure. And
I'm gonna let Doc take the wheel. But I'm glad you came in, man. And please come on again, Ike. I appreciate it, brother. Thank you, sir.
Peace.
All right, be good. All right. Shout out to my man Shocks for that $10 super sticker. He said that many brothers actually prefer the daughters of the continent, but how us black men come back to stereotypes promoted by the West. And that's a deal, right? And I'm gonna let Doc answer in a minute. And then also shout out to my man Tim Howard. He said a great show, SYSBM and Passport Travel. And then shout out to my man Asor C. He said, I appreciate all you brothers slowly getting back into the contribution game. Thank you for your time, Jim. No doubt. Thank you, Asor C.
That's a bet, right?
That's a deal, right?
That's a deal, right? That's a bet, right? That's a deal, right? That's a deal, right?
The proper vetting. He talked about nature, duty, and also the woman's nature. What shocked you the most, Doc, about the nature of women in Senegal and Gambia? Because you're right, many times we talk about South America. You and I both were in South America last year in Brazil. But let's look at the parallels or the paradoxes between the West African woman and also the Brazilian women. What was the paradoxical difference that you saw between the two, Doc?
I mean, they both come from, very traditional cultures and everything. You know what I mean? So I wouldn't say there's a paradox. I would just say that women all over the world, they want something, and so it is true. I mean, there are trade-offs, you know what I mean? And so when you're coming to them, they see something and you see something, and there's an exchange. You understand? I think that's the thing that stands out, is that there is an exchange. Someone might call it a transaction or what have you. It is what it is, um, because they know, based on how they've been socialized and acculturated and what have you, that there's a task, there's something that they have to bring to you, and that you, as a man, shaped, as a man, in traditional ways or what have you, you have to do your job. You
Hmm.
understand? And so the
Hmm.
thing about it is that there was clarity. There was clarity. There was no ambiguity. There was no ambiguity about um, what a man is, what a woman is, and those kind of traditional characteristics that we assign to each gender and what have you. And so the lack of ambiguity is what stands out. You understand? Now, like I said before, you're going to have situations you might meet people who will try to manipulate, or who will try to um, get over on you. You know what I mean? And
Hmm.
I think that's just all over the world. You understand? And so you just have to, be sensitive to that. And it goes back to what you were talking about with Ike in terms of vetting. And if you're a man who's lived in the world and you've dealt with women, you can pick up on it. I mean, it shouldn't take you a whole lot to figure out if somebody is trying to take advantage of you, or exploit you or manipulate you or scam you and that sort of thing. It don't take a whole lot. And then
Hmm.
it don't take a whole lot for you to figure out if a person is sincere, and they really want to have a connection and they really want to have a mutual exchange, between you. But I would say the difference is, socially, I found my experience in Senegal to be more hospitable.
Right.
And Brazil is laid back. They got hospitality that is there. But my experience, was one where people were more laid back. They were more laid back and easygoing and what have you. And I had more positive relations in Senegal, Dakar in particular, and in Gambia than I did in Brazil.
When we talk about, how can I say it? Don't cast your pearls to swine. What was the allure of Senegal, Senegambia, that made you want to give your pearls to an African woman that honors tradition and a healthy patriarchy?
It was the culture. It was the culture. I mean, like I said, just a laid back culture, man. And we talk about coolness, the idea of coolness in black people. You are right there, at the source. You're looking at the source of what it means to be cool and to be laid back, and swag and all that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? And not to say it's not. I didn't see it in Brazil or what have you, but it was just a different vibe. It was just a vibe. I'll give you an example. So when I was in Gambia, Gambia reminded me of Jamaica. I've been to Jamaica, Ocho Rios, been to Kingston, and Gambia felt like Kingston, Jamaica, and just the vibe that was there, and there's a very interesting relationship between Gambia and Jamaica. There's a lot of reggae music that's played there and what have you.
Hmm.
And it just the vibe, man. Out, in terms of entertainment and in terms of the nightlife and everything like that. It just, I was just very, 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 very comfortable. You know what I mean? And then, you're surrounded. So the other thing is you're surrounded by black skin. So on my posts, I've said this about Africa, to the guys who follow me and what have you. I said, that the coffee is better. The coffee is better. in Africa is blacker, is darker, is better, and you're around all this blackness. You understand? So when you're dealing with Latin American cultures, that have been inundated with certain kinds of whiteness, and it's not the same kind of whiteness that you find in the West, but it is whiteness nonetheless. It kind of diffuses um, the thickness of the black experience. So the thing about Senegal, when I was there at the time, especially my first trip there, and when I was by myself, just traveling alone, I was just taken away by just being surrounded by blackness. So you're in a black country, a country ran by black people. Of course, it's a country that has been dominated for a long time by the French.
Right.
But when you walk into businesses, you walk into restaurants, you walk into cafes, you go to the laundromat, you go to the grocery store, you get in the cab, you just do your day-to-day thing. You're dealing with black people, and that is profound in and of itself. To see a country that is ran by black people, you see, and you see black people at a variety of levels.
Right.
Contrary to all the myths that the passport haters like to put out about passport bros, which basically say that we're dealing with poor, downtrodden, ashy foot people.
Yeah, ashy foot, right? Dirty foot.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, let me tell you something, man. I was around Africans, who live much better than many black people in the United States. Driving around in Range Rovers, living in plush homes, people who have businesses, people who are at the highest levels of, professional life in their countries and what have you. You know what I mean? It's a beautiful thing. You know what I mean? Whereas you go to a country, Brazil, in Brazil, the dark skinned, the black people, they're at the bottom. They just at the bottom.
Right.
They ain't running anything. Black people in Brazil are not running anything. Okay. And so that's the difference right there. You understand? And you got middle class women, you've got upper class women. You go to the grocery store and you see them. And they're not trying to leave their countries. They love their countries and what have you. And again, you can engage them. And as I said earlier, there's the Islamic factor. There's Islam, and Islam makes a difference. And even French, Africans, the way Africans speak French is not the way in which the Parisians, the French people, speak French in the white French world. You know what I mean? And they have their own francophone culture that is there. You understand? So that's the difference right there.
Shout out to my man Brandon Jeff for that 10. He said, "Great discussion, gentlemen. I've never seen Dr. Neal smile so much when African women were discussed." Yeah, I agree.
That's a bet, right? That's a deal, right? That's a deal, right? That's a bet, right? That's a deal, right?
That's the thing. That's the thing, man. So here's the thing, man. If you want you, so here's the thing. I'm just out of it. My primary attraction is to black women.
Right.
That's my primary attraction.
Like most of us.
I love women in general, right? I love women in general, and I've done all the shades and all that kind of stuff. You understand what I'm saying? But melanin, we talk, what people say, what we say here in America, melanated people and all that kind of stuff, or melanated women. You understand? And it is what it is, and again, I like them light skinned, I like them tan or whatever, you know what I'm saying? But I like them chocolate, I like them black. You understand? And if you are a black man, and I'm going to say this until I die, if you are a black man and you want you a chocolate woman, you want you a black, I'm a brown man. My father is this color right here. He's this color. Okay. My mother was light skinned. She was light bright. My mother was a mulatto. She was a super a super mulatto with full lips and kinky hair. That was my mother. You understand what I'm saying? But I grew up wanting blackness. You understand what I'm saying? And so you walk into, I'm going to tell you, man, you got the finest, and this is all you brothers who are listening. And I told this to Kosher, and I told this to everybody else. They in Brazil now. You got some dark-skinned, chocolate, black, super fine women in Brazil. They there. They're there. And let me tell you something. I love it, and I'm going to go back to it. I got to go to Salvador Bahia. But when I was in Senegal and when I was in Gambia, I saw the most attractive, gorgeous, pretty, voluptuous black women that I've ever seen in my life. Knocking out, even if we got them here in America, but it'll make you think 10 times about America.
Right.
It'll change your mind. Just seeing that with your own eyes does something to you psychologically. And you're dealing with, here's the other thing, you're dealing with people with a different orientation. It's a different orientation, a different psychology, mentality. Okay? Again, I talked about Islam and what have you. When people take family seriously, marriage seriously,
right.
legacy seriously. Tradition seriously. You understand what I'm saying? Shame seriously.
Right.
You understand what I'm saying? The ratchets don't run the culture.
Right.
The ratchets don't run things.
And that's the question I wanted to ask you, Doc. Are women in general shamed for having kids out of wedlock based on what you've seen in Senegambia?
Yes.
Talk about that.
Yes.
Talk about
it.
They
tell me. And I've had the conversations that, yes, because particularly in an Islamic society, you have it. If you get pregnant and you're not married, it comes with a stigma. It comes with a stigma, and one of the stigmas is that men ain't gonna mess with you. That's the stigma. The stigma is that, the society will love you and what have you, but you stigmatized. You understand? Having babies out of wedlock is not something that is elevated. It is not celebrated. Unlike it is in America, we don't. They don't. Single mothers are not heroes. Okay, and that's one thing that you learn. Very fast. When you go there, you understand. And the women who are really about themselves, the single women, the last thing that they're trying to do is have a baby outside of wedlock. Okay? Now they got it. They got it now. The women got it, okay? But it does affect them, socially. You know what I'm saying? So it's just very, very different. And even virginity is a big thing. It's a big thing. Again, we're talking about Islamic society and what have you. And it is what it is, man. It is what it is.
What is the penalty, man, for promiscuity, but also having kids out of wedlock in Gambia and Senegambia?
No marriage.
No marriage, right?
Yeah, I mean that's it. I mean, guys, traditional Muslim people, men and women, the idea is that you have babies in marriage, and you marry somebody until you die. They have divorce. You marry somebody until you die or divorce or what have you. But it's the death part that stands out. You know what I mean? And that's it. But from my sense, and I'm preparing to go back, in 2023. What we do in America, it don't work there. You don't have, men marrying single mothers and being stepdaddies. That's not like a tradition. You know what I mean? And part of it has to do with the extended family. So the extended family plays such a role in raising children, that there is a relative safety net for children that are born out of wedlock. Okay, but you don't have, like we do, a long tradition of men marrying women who have children from other men. You understand? And so that's a lesson for all of us in terms of how this part of the world works.
You know, Doc, you talked about feeling that peace when you were in Senegal and Gambia, and let's do a comparison, contrast with the stress levels in Africa or in Senegal against Senegambia compared to here in the West. Let's talk about the comparison or the dichotomy between the two.
Yeah. So the thing is that you don't have so we live in a very competitive culture in America. And everything is, I mean, we live in a rat race, a dog eat dog, and all that kind of stuff. And individualism is very high, and materialism. Right now, family is devalued. Human relationships are devalued, and that is stressful. You know what I mean? And the reality is, and I've said this on previous broadcast that you've done, and that is that we're not programmed to be alone. Human beings is not. It is not. Some people call it nature, but it's just not the way we are designed. To be men or women.
We're better together. We're better together.
It ain't. That's not the design. You understand what I'm saying? And the dysfunction of the West is of such where it has elevated people being alone as some type of liberation. You understand? So when you travel to different parts of the world that are more social, so one thing, the beautiful thing about my experience in just going there, and even Brazil as well, is that the culture, it's a social culture, that people are social, they're interacting. And if it's not with their families, it's with friends, it's with connections and what have you. You don't have high levels of individualism. So it's kind of like here we have this whole problem with mass shooters and the whole phenomenon of incels and all that kind of stuff. And stereotypically, these people are like people who are isolated, they're by themselves, they don't have any connections and what have you. And the idea is that they have broken down psychologically because they don't have human connections. Okay. And then they act out. You understand? Another example is what happens with prisons. You worked in prisons.
Yeah, I did.
You know what it's like to put people in solitary confinement. You know what happens to men, and it happens even to women too, but more so we know more about men in solitary confinement. When you put a person by themselves for a long period of time with no human connection, that person, if they're not strong enough, that person will break.
They'll break, right.
They will break. So you have a culture outside of America where that doesn't make any sense. You understand what I'm saying?
Right.
That is that people are interacting. Okay. And I give an example, like, when I went to Brazil, one of the profound things that I saw, and I've told the story again, I said over and over again, was watching homeless people, was watching homeless men and women be together. Walking through the streets of Rio, and I saw a couple laying on cardboard, with sheets and what have you, holding each other.
Right.
And I'm like, that's it right there. You understand what I'm saying? In America, we call, if you're a man, you ain't got no money, you dusty, you're
right,
obsolete and what have you. The women, they don't want to mess with you or what have you. I go to this country, the homeless people can get together. The poor people can get together and have real relationships on the street and don't even have roof over their head.
Right.
That speaks to the social dynamic in the culture.
Right.
That things that I mean, you're a clinician. The world is interdependent.
Right. Interdependent. Right.
So you're going into a culture that still has the interdependent dynamic.
Right. Right. And we used to be that way. We used to be that way at one point, Doc. But sad, I believe liberalism and liberal ideologues have more or less transfixed the minds of so many of our women, Doc, to the point that they have been so encapsulated by the assumption that they are being oppressed by men that it hinders them from being in relationships that can not only benefit them but community. And I've said before in the past, Doc, that when it comes down to power, sadly, not all, but many of our women vote for themselves. But when it comes down to servitude, they want men to come and give their service unconditionally. And then when we don't do it, they try to shame us. Doc, here recently, Dr. Alan Roger Curry passed away, and he was the purveyor of Mode 1. And, it touched me deeply. So many men are passing away. Men are dying off. I mean, great content creators like him and Kevin Samuels. They're gone, man. And one thing I love about you, you say live out loud. Live out loud, Black male agency, Black male independence. Is game needed in Africa?
No.
Tell the audience why.
No. Game is not needed. Going back to what I just said in terms of, the culture being social, you understand? And game is not needed because relationships are valued. The relationships between men and women, they're taken seriously. Mm-hmm. You understand? And again, I don't want to, we're not romanticizing anything like that. They have their flaws and what have you. And when you talk to the women, they have their own ideas of good men and bad men and stuff like that. But when I have talked to people, is that relationships are valuable. Relationships are more valuable than, or I would say they're more valuable, but they are not competing with money and materialism and that sort of thing. And so, the whole idea of game is about psychological manipulation. That's what game is about. Mm-hmm. And, game is about getting over, taking advantage of somebody emotionally and what have you. And that's not necessary in a context where people are adults. I put it like this. They're adults. We're talking about adults, men and women. Let me tell you something. So one thing that's interesting. And I posted this picture on my Facebook page of two women from Gambia, young women in their mid-20s, whom I met. Okay. You would be taken by the level of maturity that women have in their 20s over there. I mean, the level of, I'm talking about psychologically, you know what I'm saying? And so it's like here in the United States, your average 20-year-old female, she's thinking like she's 15 to 16 years old. Okay. You go to Gambia, you meet a 20-year-old, she's thinking like she's 30 years old. You understand what I'm saying? And the reason why you're doing that is because they still have the connection between the generations. Okay. You still have connections between grandmothers and grandfathers, aunts and uncles and all that kind of stuff, which we once had, which values a relationship. How does that relate? How does that relate to game? You don't need no game if you are a mature human being and you're able to connect with another human being who is mature, who is fully formed. So there is a level of immaturity that is tied to what we call game in the West. And here's the other thing. Here's the problem with game in the West. Game in the West is short term. Game is fundamentally oriented towards short-term relationships. Right. So, in as much as I appreciated Alan Roger Curry and rest in peace to him, and he did a lot in terms of the heterosexual male space, and there's a lot to say about what he did and what have you. But Mode 1 and his whole philosophy, all of that was geared towards short-term relationships. Right. That's your people who are coming in and out of your life. So game only works on the short term. game does not work when you're dealing with a culture that is not oriented towards primarily short-term relationships.
Right.
So when you're meeting women, we talk about traditional women or whatever, when you're meeting women who have been shaped by tradition, they're not interested. Ike talked about this.
Right.
Ike said this earlier. He was making a distinction between immediate gratification and long-range type thinking. You understand what I'm saying? That is that in a traditional culture, people are oriented towards the long term. They're not oriented towards hedonism in the moment. So game is about hedonism in the moment. That's why game typically, works for young guys. It's good for guys who are in college, good for guys who are in their early 20s, good for young bachelors and what have you, and sometimes going into your 30s. Game, it works in a culture, I'll put it like this, in a culture in America that has basically destroyed the importance of long-term relationships. So game works in America when you've destroyed marriage, when you've destroyed family, when there is no possibility of being in a long-term relationship.
Right. I totally agree. But also when you more or less aggrandize entitlement, Doc, traveling abroad opens your eyes up to a lot of things, and to the single men that are listening, what do they need to know about the Senegambian women in order to become successful in relationships? Some say be yourself. Some say, what type of decorum do they need to have? Should this be themselves? How do they approach a woman of West African culture if they want a good woman?
Yeah, I think that you need to be yourself. I think you need to learn. And here's what I want you guys to do. I need you to learn as much as you can about the culture before you go there. I've been studying, West African traditions for a minute. You know what I mean? I'm not an expert, but I didn't go into those parts of Africa without some type of familiarity with the culture. You understand? Senegal is a French-speaking country, okay? And I had to brush up on French that I learned years ago, kind of basic, rudimentary French in order to get around and what have you. So it's important that you know some of the basic aspects of the culture. It's an Islamic culture, so you need to understand, how they're oriented in terms of Islam. You know what I mean? You have some Christians there. Christianity is a minority tradition, and I met some Christian Gambian women that are there, evangelical and what have you. They exist. And in Senegal, you have Catholicism and you have the evangelical traditions, but the predominant tradition is Islam and what have you. So, to know that, and and to be yourself, and to also recognize that you're an American. You do have currency as an American. You're going to be seen. You're American. You're seen in a certain kind of way. America is seen in a certain kind of way, and that's an advantage that you have. That's leverage. It's a positive thing. It's a positive thing. Um, if it does become negative, it's only if you're dealing with people who might try to scam you because you're a tourist or you're someone who is a visitor. So you have to be aware of folks who might want to exploit you economically because you're visiting the country and what have you, and that's going to happen wherever you go, anywhere in the world. So those are kind of the basic things, but you don't have to walk up in there like you some super player if that's not who you are. I'll put it like that. If that is not who you are, if you are not one of these over the type ladies men and what have you, you don't go up in there trying to be that way. And I'm gonna be honest with you, even if you are an over the top ladies man, you want to have some decorum. You know what I'm saying? You want to have some decorum. When you go there, you don't want to, be too much of a beast. I put it like that. You know what I'm saying? You just need to tame it, keep it under control. Because I'm telling you this now, in Senegal, the men protect their women now. They protect their women. They protect their women, and they know that you're American. and they can see that you're an American, and they know that you got eyes on their women. I'm put it like that. They know that you got eyes on their women, and you might have some interactions. I had some interactions.
Talk about them real quick. Talk about
some Singalese men. They see you interacting with the women, and the women are responding to you. And you have guys. I'll give you an example, man. So I walked up into a boutique. There were these women. There's a boutique not far from where I was living. This is my first experience there, and I just walked up in there, just being a social man, talking to the women. You know what I'm saying? These two sisters, and they were selling purses, they were selling jewelry, they were just selling stuff, women stuff, right? So I just walked up in there just to be friendly with them. You know what I mean? And they were very responsive, man.
Right.
And I would say less than 10 minutes in my conversation, man, some Singalese guys, man, he just walked up in there, and I guess he knew them. He didn't come in there to do business. He came in there to police me. Okay.
Right.
Well, as I was talking to these women, you know what I mean? And I found it interesting and humorous and laughable. But what it was clear, and that wasn't the first time something like that had happened. Yeah, those guys are protective. They're protective. Now the women gonna make their choices. They're gonna choose whether they're gonna deal with you or not. But the women were very open and hospitable to me.
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't know me, and he must have saw the player in me or something like that.
It's all the player. Shout out to my man GC from LA for that 10, man.
It's a bet, right?
I appreciate
That's a
it,
deal,
man.
right? That's a deal, right?
And,
that's
I
a
appreciate
bet,
it,
right? That's a
LA.
deal, right? That's a
But
deal,
that is
right?
true.
Got 5 on it.
And I had similar experience in grocery stores. You know what I'm saying? You know what I mean? You talk to the women. Now, some of the Singalese guys, not to their credit, them guys know if they see you talking to the women, they ain't gonna mess with you. You know what I'm saying? They just leave it alone, whatever. But you have some guys, who are very protective or whatever. You know what I mean? They're not gonna step to you and say anything to you. But they might do some cop blocking and play some interference. And so
what that look like? Hold tight. Shout out to my man Sir Hill, the young lion, for that 5. Thank you, Sir Hill. Thank you to the young lion. He killing the game. That young man is growing, and I appreciate it, brother. But what does it look like, Doc? Invariably,
you can have a conversation. You know what I'm saying? He might come up and he start talking to her in French. He might start talking to her in Wolof. Even though I don't speak fluent French or whatever, you know what's going on right there. You know what I'm saying? You got somebody that's player hating on you. You know what I'm saying? And he might know her, he might not know her. You understand what I'm saying? But that's that protective Islamic masculinity that comes out or what have you. But I have to say that I didn't experience a whole lot of that. But you can have moments that you run into that depending on your situation. Again, I was at a boutique one time, then I was in a grocery store another time, where you get some of that or what have you. And then at other times, most of the guys, they don't care. They don't care because they have a surplus. So here's the thing about it. They got a surplus. You got men from France who are coming in. You got Frenchmen that are coming in dealing with women. You got men from Canada who are coming in. White men. You got white men coming in. You got men from Germany. You got men from all parts of Europe coming into West Africa, getting women. You understand what I'm saying? So, and everybody knows what's going on with that. You see what I'm saying? And so, I mean, it's done. So and then it could be some, masculinity thing going on. You're American black man, he's African man. It depends on again the context, the person, but most of them Singalese guys, they ain't care.
What would you take from this show? We're gonna end it in a minute. My Heel's about to play Clemson for that ACC championship, but like I said, I thought about you and Ike for this show. It was very impromptu. I said, let me come up with a thumbnail for Doc and Ike, and specifically Ike because he's from Nigeria. But what can you take away from this show? Because once again, men are dying off early. Doc, I don't know if you're going to ever get married. Maybe you will, you might not. But for a man that want to set up his homestead in Africa, what are the challenges and barriers and I'm, associated with a man trying to set up a homestead in West Africa. And then what did you get from the show that was so profound?
And I want to say shout out to James Turner. James Turner is right, man. You can stick out too much now. You got to watch out for that. James Turner put that in the chat right there. You're taller than me, Kosher, and I'm 6'1", man. I'm 6'1". I tend to average about 210, 215. You know what I'm saying? I got my glasses. I walk in the synagogue. Ain't nobody wearing no glasses like me. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And so, and I got stairs and stuff like that. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, when you stand out, they see you. You know what I mean? Then you got the mannerisms. They know you American. I'll put it like that. They know
Right.
And all that, and there's stuff that comes with that, good and bad, but not enough to keep you out those countries. I'll put it like that. You know what I'm saying? But the major takeaway, that I have is that Africa is an option. Africa is a major, major, major option that brothers should not overlook. Okay. Again, I'm going back to West Africa in 2023 real soon. I'm also going to East Africa. I plan to do that sometime during the summertime. The Kenya, Uganda part, East Africa, and what have you. I look forward to that. You know what I mean? And we don't talk enough about. I said this when I first came on, the continent of Africa. You know what I mean? And in the passport community, and you started. You talked about O'Shea's new Pan-African dating thing and all that. This needs to be talked about. Because we need to have a healthy relationship with Africa, and I think the African women are an option, man. They're a viable option.
Oh,
man.
yeah,
Tell you something.
Viable, yeah.
I mean, and the thing is that, and I said this on, on my own channel, on Facebook and what have you, man. I've relocated. My attraction, my desire for Black women in the world, it has relocated. You know what I mean? In general, I mean, it's relocated to Caribbean, to South America, but in particular, it has relocated to Africa. Okay, because I felt a connection to Africa when I was there, especially my second trip. I was there for 34 days. I had a connection there that I haven't had anywhere that I've traveled to in the world. I didn't want to leave. My last day, the day before I left, it was very emotional experience. You guys, whether you know it or not, I met a woman in Africa, in Senegal, who I've been involved with, who I care for. You know what I'm saying? And we spent lots of time together on my return, to Senegal, and I met other women too. But the human connection that I experienced was just so profound, that I came to the conclusion that the brothers don't need to focus exclusively on the world, the international world, beyond Africa. You understand what I'm saying? Again, 1.2 billion people together, over 500 million women from east to west, north to south. There's so much to tap into. And women are just a window into the culture. That's what they are. An entree into a larger thing that's going on. Okay. When I was in Gambia, man, I was at the Atlantic. I'm looking at the Atlantic where slaves were transported from Gambia to North America. When I was in Senegal, I went to Gorée Island and I saw what happened in Gorée Island, in terms of the slave trade and what have you.
Right.
So when we talk about West Africa, and we mentioned, Nigeria and all that kind of stuff, it ain't just about some women. It's about memory. It's about reconnecting.
Right.
You understand what I'm saying? Remember Alex Haley, the book Roots was based in West Africa. It dealt with the Gambian experience.
Right.
And in Gambia, you go to Gambia, you can go to those places that are featured in that book Roots and in that film, that whole the history of what Alex Haley was talking about. So that's what I'm talking about.
The Dinka tribe. Shock said, last question. We're going to sign off, Doc. Get ready for this football game. Last question for me. Why are the American women here heavily into divesting and blackmail bashing? Just something I noticed they louder than black women at times. What's your take on that, Doc?
Those are westernized African women who were either born here in the U.S. Or they were born in Africa, but were raised in the U.S. All right, and so those women who do that, so those are particular types of African women who have a strong identification with their white colonizers, a very, very strong identification. Whether they're Nigerian, a lot of them are Nigerian. There's a whole bunch of Nigerian divestors that are out there that are like that. Some of them are from, Cameroon, Congo, or whatever. You know what I mean? I haven't seen too many Ghanaian people who are like that. But those women are women who have really been inundated with American culture. And a lot of those women, when they do go back to their home countries, they're seen as American, more American than they are African. You know what I'm saying? And so, like in Nigeria, and I'm sorry Ike is not here, they call them Americana. So if you get a Nigerian woman who has been, deeply Americanized, when she goes back to Nigeria, she's not seen as an authentic or a true Nigerian. She's Americana. You understand what I'm saying? And that's the same, and the same dynamic exists for those Nigerians or even those Africans who have gone to the UK, all right, who live in London and what have you. You know what I mean? So they have a strong identification with the colonizers. And those women, here's the thing, those women are not quite the same as continental African women. When you meet some continental African women on the continent, you got some continental African women, they deal with them Frenchmen, they deal with the Germans and other European men, but they don't have the type of fixation that the women, African women or the African-derived women have who live in the West. So, so you're talking about these women who are in Los Angeles, they're Nigerian, they're in New York, some of them in Miami. They just have a strong identification with white daddy, or white zaddy.
Right. Over-identification and also the minimization of black masculinity in America, but also the joy and power and the struggle of what could be. Doc, it appears that America is on its last leg when it comes down to civility, common sense, but also the honor and respect of traditional heteronormative masculinity. Where do we go from here as we're about to sign off? And thank you, brother, for tuning in. I still want to do another show. I don't know. I guess I need to do a special show with you, Gambia, but maybe you answered all the questions, man. But I'm glad you tuned in. But go ahead, Doc. Where do we go from here, man? Because, your war cry is black male independence and black male agency. But where do men go from here, those that are single and looking for traditional women?
Yeah, I would just say this, anything worth having is something that you got to work for. And to become a man takes work. And the stuff that we're talking about here involves work. If you want a better situation in terms of your dynamics with women, you got to work. Travel involves work. Being able to travel involves work.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? If you can, if you're a truck driver, you know what I mean, and you have reached the upper echelons of truck driving, you know what I'm saying? You're someone who has put in a lot of work to be, that high caliber person in your field. Similarly, in terms of your profession, you're a licensed clinical social worker. There are levels to this thing, right?
Right.
and you keep on working. So your personal life, your emotional life requires that kind of work. And so the thing about it is that, passport stuff that we're talking about, travel ideology, is not for people who are unwilling to put in any kind of work.
Right.
If you want a better life, you're going to have to make those investments
right.
to have it, to travel, to stay in the country for a month, 3 months, 4 months, a year, or whatever, or to travel 2 or 3 times, 4 or 5 times a year, what have you. That requires an investment and sacrifice. That requires that you become disciplined and what have you. So every Black man has to look in within himself and figure out what kind of investment he's going to make. If you don't want this matrix, if you're tired of this American situation, you're going to do whatever it takes to move beyond it. Okay? Travel is a solution. Travel, the passport bro phenomenon, is a solution to a very real problem. And the reason why it's getting so much traction and people are talking about it so much is because it's a solution to a problem.
It's a solution, right. It is a solution. It's a viable solution, but also it's consistent with Dr. William Glasser, where he said the needs drive behaviors. And those 5 core elements are power, fun, freedom, belonging, and survival. And that's what men are looking for. Go ahead.
And the thing is that it's not, women are a piece of it. But the other part of it is your mental health.
Yes, sir.
And your state of mind and your well-being. So I'm going to say this. I mean, spending 34 days in Senegal, I've never been to a therapist. You know this, Coach. I've told you before.
Right.
But it was therapy for me.
It was therapy, right.
It was therapeutic. Being away and being in a different environment and culture and orientation, it was healing. It was and being outside of the toxicity.
Right.
That is America. And I made a video about that when I was in Gambia, just being at the toxicity of the United States. And we Black men have to take that seriously if we want well-being. If we don't want to be men who find ourselves going off the hinges, it pains me every time I see these brothers going off the deep end.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? In terms of violent behavior, reckless behavior, self-destructive behavior. You know what I'm saying? And so you have to invest in your well-being. And that's what—
I totally agree, man.
That's what it's all about. I have completely checked out. I'm at a place I've completely checked out of the United States. I just don't look at it. I live here, I work here, and I'm going to continue to live here and work here. But I have, in terms of my emotional life, I'm not invested in America. I don't go out and hang out and run around and do these social things in America that I once did. You understand what I'm saying? Because I found a solution to the problems that I was dealing with in terms of my overall well-being. And so Black men can do the same thing. That's where we go. We're not going to change America.
No, we're not. It's going to take, right.
We're not going to reverse this situation that we're dealing with. But there are strategies, there are things that we can do to overcome it, to get out of it, to triumph it, and travel is a part of it. You know what I'm saying? And so if a Black man, I don't care what his station is, if he can go out and get a car loan for a car that costs $40,000, which he gonna use to impress some 304, he can get him a passport.
No doubt, definitely.
And he can travel the doggone world.
And see, yes.
If you can go out there and buy you a car that's going to depreciate, once you drive it off the lot, it doesn't matter what your station is, you can travel.
I totally agree. Doc, it's been a great one, man. I love you, brother. I'm about to see these heels get it in, man. And shout out to my man, James Turner. Always showing love, James Turner. And there are 7 steps that a man must go do in order to become optimized. Here recently, it's become 8 with this bad internet service that I'm working on, man. But anyway, Doc, it's been a great show, man. I love you, brother.
Appreciate you, man.
We will do it again, man. Maybe I can get up to Africa with you, man, because I've been wanting to go to South Africa for some time. And also shout out to my man Shocks again. He's a fellow therapist too. Shocks, we need to do a show at some point. Most of the people contribute to the FBA African Rift. Yeah, I totally agree, man. But you're right, man. I'm checking out mentally too because it's very toxic. It's not good for your health. And you will die off early, man, trying to change a culture. They don't care. The lack of self-awareness, the lack of empathy, and also the over-identification with policies that are not consistent with a more stable and a more sound union here in America. But anyway, Doc, signing off, brother. Love you, brother. I'll see you around, brother. Yes, be good. All right. All right, guys, I told you there are 7 steps the men must go through in order to become optimized in world travel and understanding how family play a role on the function of a man. It's paramount as we move forward. So, guys, we're about to end this stream. Hopefully, my heels will be Clemson on tonight. But if they don't, it's just an honor to be in the ACC Championship. So, guys, thank you for tuning in. Thank you to all the brothers that donated. And shout out to the #1 sponsor, as in James Turner. I appreciate it, James Turner. Shout out to the moderators, Tim Howard, Top Gun, and all the brothers that came in and the young sisters. And so, guys, we're signing off. And I need you guys to remember this. If it ain't 7, it ain't kosher. We signing off, guys. Take care. Be well. All right, guys, the verdict is out. 77% of the men out of votes of 102 said that African women are a viable option. That's more than average. And so to the single men, traveling abroad might be your next best choice for finding a traditional woman and find a woman that you can help and certainly help address your missions as a man. 4 minutes after the hour, 8 o'clock, bring to you live from the greatest state in the union, the Tarheel State. As we're signing off. And remember this, guys, continue to love yourself. Get your health up. Don't settle for mediocrity. And continue to set values and boundaries that are consistent with helping you become the better version of yourself. Be well, brothers.
In the morning, you got me up, all cause you need to talk. To 4 in the evening, wanna break up, say that you've had enough. I'm tired of talking, again and again, argue about everything. You are my darling, let's kiss and make up, I know you wanna touch. You call me every night, call me every day, I just wanna get you alone now. Trust me when I say